Nazar Viktorovsky volunteered for the front in the first days of the full-scale invasion. The man lost his legs after being wounded in Chasovye Yar, but after rehabilitation, he started working for the Ternopil police. Here is his story. I remember that we were brought to abandoned dormitories. We settled in, and 4 days later, the plane arrived. I woke up in total darkness. My legs were squeezed by something. A few hours later, I stopped feeling them. But even then, I could not think that they would be cut off. Viktorivsky, a resident of Ternopil, recalls that day. He is 35 years old. Before the full-scale invasion, he worked as a train driver on the railroad in Ternopil. He liked his job. February 24, 2022 came as a shock to Nazar's family, as well as to millions of other Ukrainians. On February 28th, the man packed his things and went to the military registration and enlistment office with his cousin. They volunteered, but ended up in different brigades. Nazar says that his wife Natalia and 6-year-old daughter had a hard time accepting his decision to fight. They tried to talk me out of it, but I didn't hear them. It was good that my wife didn't cry, Nazar recalls. He adds that she cried only once, when she heard that he was wounded and had his legs amputated. Nazar says that since childhood, he has dreamed of joining the steel industry. That's what he calls working on the railroad. But he adds that he would never have thought that one day his legs would also be made of steel. For some reason, I liked trains and tracks. I used to play with toy railroads, and then after the 9th grade, I decided to enter a railway technical school. Then, I continued my studies at the Kharkiv Railway Academy and started working at the same time, Nazar says. The man says that for several months before the full-scale invasion, he often thought that a serious war was about to begin. However, February 24 came as a shock. I was with my family for 4 days, and on February 28, my cousin and I decided to go to the military commissariat. My family did not know where I was or what I was doing. I decided not to tell them. I told them when I had already passed a medical examination at the military commissariat and was found fit, adds the Ternopil resident. Vasil, the name of Nazar's brother, took part in battles and was injured several times. He served as a paratrooper with the 81st Separate Air Mobile Brigade. His right arm began to go numb from the contusions, and he felt very unwell. After the commission, he was assigned the 3rd group of disability. Now he is not serving, says Nazar Viktorovsky. He himself says that he understood well what the army was. In 2009 or 2010, Nazar served in the air defense. He was a senior operator of a radio station, sitting behind the radar and detecting enemy targets. However, he was drafted as an ordinary infantryman to the 24th Separate Mechanized Brigade. Nazar, along with other volunteers, trained for 2 months in the Lviv region. After that, the hard service began. In July of 2022, their unit was transferred to the town of Chasiv Yar in Donetsk Oblast. On the 5th day, rockets hit the building where the unit was stationed. Nazar assumes that someone could have handed over their positions to the Russian military. In July of 2022, rockets hit a house in Chasovye Yar where a man was staying. He recalls that many people managed to escape. I remember that I was on the 2nd floor. It was already evening, and then I felt an explosion. I lost consciousness from a strong impact. I came to in about 2 hours. It was dark everywhere, and I felt that my legs were crushed to the knees by concrete floors and stones. I didn't see my comrades, but I heard them screaming, Nazar recalls. The man did not see other wounded because it was pitch black. At that time, he wanted only one thing, to be found and pulled out as soon as possible, and he was very happy when he heard the rescuers. I remember praying loudly the whole time. When I was praying, I didn't feel any pain, and when I stopped, it came back. I also found 2 bottles of water in the dark, and at first, I poured it on myself so that I would not lose consciousness. But in the morning, I lost hope that they would dig me out quickly because the rescuers explained that it would not be that soon. The rubble had to be removed carefully, Nazar recalls. Eventually, 19 hours later, the man was pulled out of the rubble, but he could no longer feel his legs. I wouldn't wish this on anyone, but it's an incredible feeling when you see the first rays of light after you've already buried yourself in your mind, he says. After the rescue operation, Nazar was immediately taken to the hospital. From there, the man called his wife and told her what had happened. The woman wanted to come to him, but he forbade her to and assured her that he would be transferred to Lviv, where they would meet. When they pulled me out and I couldn't stand on my legs, I didn't realize that they would have to be amputated. I spent a week in intensive care in Lviv hospital, and none of the doctors mentioned amputation. Just before the operation, a surgeon came to me and said that my legs should be cut off. I replied that if it was necessary, then cut them off, Nazar recalls. Natalia's wife recalls that on the Sunday of the tragedy, she received a call saying that Nazar was on a mission. His legs were buried in concrete, and they were trying to save them. I was shocked by this information. I couldn't find a place to sit, but then I started praying, calmed down, knew he was alive. I prayed the rosary all night and fell asleep. I woke up to another call, this time from Nazar. He sounded so hoarse and weak. I asked him how he was, if his legs hurt, and he told me that they didn't, because they were gone, Natalia recalls. The man underwent 7 surgeries. After the surgeries, he stayed in intensive care for a long time because of complications with his kidneys. The woman adds that she tried not to cry on the phone so that Nazar would not hear. She also did not show her emotions in front of her daughter, but cried at work, where her colleagues calmed her down and talked to her. I came to see him in Lviv and was very happy to see him. I was even happier when he could come home. We have a 1-room apartment, and I tried to make our life easier. I put all the things that my husband had to get himself downstairs: plates, cups, clothes. In the bathroom, I put a mirror lower so that he could shave and comb his hair himself. And so, basically, I will always serve and bring what he needs, says Natalia. She works as a speech therapist at a rehabilitation center where she works with children. She also has another job in her specialty at the rehabilitation center at Ternopil Municipal Hospital No. 1, where she works with people after strokes, head injuries, and with wounded soldiers to restore their speech. Therefore, she is well aware of how important the support of family members is. After his surgery 6 months ago, Nazar was sent to the Netherlands. At the expense of the Dutch side, I was fitted with high-quality and expensive prostheses. In Ukraine, I would hardly have been fitted with such prostheses, the man says. He admits that it took him a long time to get used to his new iron legs. Nazar says he doesn't hide the fact that he has prostheses, and he is not afraid of people staring or children pointing at his legs. Sometimes children on the street run up to me, so funny, and exclaim, "Mom, Mom, look at my uncle's iron legs." It always makes me smile. They are curious. For them, I am like a RoboCop, jokes Nazar Viktorovsky. Of the man's family, his 6-year-old daughter Victoria took the injury and prosthetics the easiest. I told her that I will have iron legs and I will be able to walk, and my daughter replied, "Finally, your feet will not be cold in winter." Nazar jokes and says that finally, after so many years, doctors have managed to cure him of chronic knee pain. I am not ashamed of it. I don't even wear pants. I try to walk in shorts. It's just more comfortable for me because pants are hard to put on, and sometimes I need to adjust my prostheses. To do this, you have to take off your pants, but in shorts I can quickly adjust them, and that's it, the man says. Viktorovsky says that his injury and amputation made him take a fresh look at his hometown. A year ago, the man could only get around in a wheelchair, and, as he admits, it was a nightmare. While in the city center, the Ternopil authorities have begun lowering curbs, installing handrails and ramps that meet the standards. The situation in the area where Nazar lives is deplorable. I am now wearing prostheses, so I can step over the curb or hold onto the handrail, but before the prostheses, I used to ride in a wheelchair. It is very difficult for people with disabilities to move around. There are many pedestrian crossings where the curbs are high. Is it possible to make a smooth descent? Nazar Viktorovsky said. Nazar has been using a wheelchair for almost a year. The man and his family live in an apartment in the Druzhba residential neighborhood. He says that there are not only no lowered curbs there, but the sidewalk itself is covered with holes, which makes it difficult to cross even for an ordinary person. According to Nazar, local authorities should take this problem more seriously. After all, many of the soldiers who were injured have undergone rehabilitation and are already returning home. After returning from the front, he didn't even think about working. However, in March of 2024, his friend, who works in the Ternopil police, told him about a vacancy for a 911 line dispatcher. Nazar came for an interview at the new situation center of the police department, passed the training, and has been working for over a month. Nazar, along with other employees, receives calls about crimes or administrative violations from 2 regions, Ternopil and Kherson. The police dispatch line from Kherson was moved to Ternopil because of the heavy workload, as there is shelling in the area every day and people call every minute. According to Ternopil Police Chief Serhiy Zubinenko, The center currently employs 12 people with disabilities. 3 of them are men who volunteered and returned with various injuries. Nazar Viktorovsky, a volunteer, former soldier, and now a police officer, says he is happy to have found a job after being injured. He adds that he is grateful to God for being alive and that his daughter and wife. Along with Nazar, another soldier who also volunteered for the war and was seriously wounded in the Donetsk sector is also training at the center. Good morning, everyone. Today I would like to tell you the story of 2 courageous men who stood up to defend their country. The first story is that of Dmytro Polovian, a Ukrainian soldier who survived captivity and despair of returning home and found a way to recover in sports and the Invictus Games. My military history. It's a difficult topic. Dmytro finds the words to describe his experience in the war. Less than a year before he joined the Invictus Games team, he was in serious condition in Russian captivity. After being exchanged in October of 22 years ago, Dmytro says it was sports that helped him better cope with the memories of that traumatic period. The 27-year-old military man told Suspilny Sport what thoughts he had about the exchange and how the Invictus Brotherhood affected his life. I came to terms with the fact that I was already dead to everyone. Dmytro Polovian's service in the Armed Forces of Ukraine began on March 17, 22 years ago. He was recruited only on the second attempt, because at first the military enlistment office refused him because of his leg injury. At first, Dmytro studied to become a grenade launcher, and a month later, he was enlisted in the Air Assault Troops, the 46th Brigade. Polovian fought in the Kherson sector. It was there that he was severely wounded during one of the July combat operations and was taken prisoner at the same time. After almost 3 months in captivity in the occupied Crimea, on October 13th, Dmytro and 19 other soldiers were released. I had no hope of surviving or returning, Dmytro admits, recalling how serious his injuries were. During the battle, he was hit in the chest, legs, and spine. Although his first reaction to the exchange was, "I'm finally back home," he soon found it difficult to cope with the sudden change in reality and to shake off the despondent thoughts that had become commonplace in recent months. Quote, "When I was in captivity, I accepted the fact that I was most likely dead to everyone," explains the soldier. "When I was wounded, I radioed in my injuries. With such injuries, the chances of survival are very minimal. I thought that my comrades and my family probably thought I was dead. It was hard to come back. We dreamed about what we would eat first when we returned. Stories about food and emotions of Ukrainian soldiers released from captivity, with numbers replaced by words." Quote, "I am also immensely happy about apples now. Even though a lot of time has passed since the exchange, Yulia Tyrapayevska, a participant of the Invictus Games, reacted to a photo of one of the liberated soldiers crying while holding an apple in April of 2023. Now another image has been added to human history due to the inhuman actions of the enemy. These words of Julia Tyrapayevska accurately describe the meaning that ordinary food can have for people who have experienced the horrors of captivity. For Dmytro Polovian and other liberated Ukrainian soldiers, food became not only a way to satisfy hunger, but also a symbol of freedom, a return to normal life, and a reminder of those who still remain in captivity. Dreams of food in captivity. Dmytro, like many other prisoners, thought a lot about food during his captivity. He made up entire menus of his favorite dishes that he would like to eat after his release. He asked his mother to bring him sweet soda from his native Kvasilev. These dreams about food became a ray of hope, motivation, and a way for him to keep in touch with normal life. Apathy and difficulties with food after release. However, after the release, the coveted meals did not always bring the expected satisfaction. On the contrary, many released soldiers faced apathy and an inability to eat. Dmytro attributes this not only to physical exhaustion, but also to psychological trauma, guilt for those who remained in captivity, and the realization of the horrific events they had experienced. Food as a way of healing. Despite the difficulties, Ukrainian soldiers released from captivity are gradually returning to normal life. Food is once again becoming a source of joy and pleasure for them. They learn to eat what they like, cook their favorite dishes, and share them with their loved ones. Food becomes not only a way to satisfy hunger, but also a part of the process of healing and returning to a full life. It is important to remember the story of Dmytro Polovian and other Ukrainian soldiers released from captivity is another reminder of the cruelty and inhumanity of Russian aggression. Their stories about food and emotions help us better understand what they went through and the importance of supporting those who have survived the horrors of captivity. Flashbacks are disturbing, but archery helps the story of Dmytro Polovian, a soldier who survived captivity and despair of returning home and found a way to recover through sports and the Invictus Games. Like his sister, who also survived captivity, Dmytro Polovian talks about the complex relationship with food for former prisoners of war. At first, he would invent entire menus with dishes that he would enjoy after his release and ask his mother to bring him sweet soda from his native Kvasiliv, Rivne region. Quote, "I and other prisoners of war dreamed about what we would eat first when we returned, what we would do first, who we would write to or call. I planned a whole schedule for myself. For example, I dreamed that I would cook the borscht with bacon for breakfast. For lunch, I would get together with my family and friends and grill kebabs. One soldier told me that he wanted boiled crayfish and beer for dinner. I thought that I should adopt this technique. However, after my discharge, these fantasies turned into apathy. When you come back, you have the opportunity to order any food, to eat anything, but you have no desire." Dmytro describes the changes in his emotions. He attributes this, among other things, to the realization that not everyone he was in captivity with was released. This thought did not allow him to fully enjoy the food to which he had no access until recently. Quote, "I could not eat a lot of things because of the food they gave me there," the soldier adds. "I weighed 100 kilograms before captivity, and when I was released, I weighed 54. I realized that I needed to gain weight, but it was difficult to overcome it. I more or less managed to do it, but still. For example, I can't eat cereals and various cereals. I've had enough of them for life." Swimming, communication with his brothers and family support are the things that Dmytro Polovian says helped him the most in adapting to his new life. The Games of the Unconquered, with their brotherly atmosphere, as he defines it, gave him 2 of the 3 points at once. Quote, "I had heard about these competitions before, but ignored them," says Dmytro. "And then I started swimming. I was coached by Andriy Badarak, a member of the previous national team, and he kept telling me about the Invictus Games and that I should try it. When I took part in the selection, I liked the atmosphere of the competition, the fact that you are next to people like you. It's the first time you see them, but the support is just enormous." After Polovian was unexpectedly selected for the Invictus Games team, he chose swimming, which is his main sport, as well as archery and wheelchair basketball for the Dusseldorf competition. "Swimming is relaxing," explains the invincible man. "You feel weightless. You can be alone with your thoughts. When you're swimming, you feel really cool." Dmytro also sees a therapeutic effect in his archery classes. Quote, "I try not to think about the captivity much, but sometimes it comes back to me involuntarily. You practice, and then flashbacks knock you out a bit. But archery helps a lot. You have to be focused on the target, forget about everything around you. There is only you and the target. Every movement has to be monotonous and clear. You have to track it. And then there is simply no room for bad memories in your head." The second and last story for today is about Artur Ladchenko. The bullet went into his stomach. It spun around, hit the edge of the armored car, and came out almost close to the lung. The kidney was torn, recalls his injury near Kupiansk senior soldier Artur Ladchenko from the 32nd Separate Mechanized Brigade. The soldier is 28 years old. He joined the armed forces of Ukraine in January of 2023. At home in Obukiv, Kyiv region, his mother, sister, niece, wife, and 2 daughters are waiting for him. He received the Order for Courage from the president. After being wounded, he had the opportunity to go for long-term rehabilitation, but decided to return to duty as soon as possible. "In the hospital, I had a thought. That's it. I've won back what was mine. The treatment was difficult. My intestines were torn up, and my spleen had to be removed," Arthur continues. "I am still ashamed of my hesitation. I could not help but return to my comrades. Before the full-scale invasion, the man worked at a plastic manufacturing plant. In February of 2022, due to the huge influx of volunteers, he could not get into the first ranks of volunteers. He waited for almost a year for his call-up. It is clear that I was afraid to go to war, although I was consciously preparing for it. But I was even more afraid to see the footage of Buka again in my city with my girls. For their sake, I overcame my natural fear. Already in the 32nd Brigade at the training ground, Artur was very active in learning, for example, first aid. He also restored his skills in handling weapons, which he had forgotten from his military service. In the application for the State Award, Artur's commander described his soldier's heroic deed as follows. Near the village of Sinkivka, Kupiansk district, Kharkiv region, after a massive mortar attack, the enemy launched an attack on one of our positions. The wounded soldiers on it needed immediate evacuation. At that time, senior soldier Artur Lachenko was at a neighboring firing position. Quickly orienting himself in the situation, he formed and led an assault group that moved to help his wounded comrades. He engaged the enemy. The Rashists suffered significant losses and retreated under the pressure of our fighters. When asked whether receiving the Order for Courage from Volodymyr Zelensky was an even greater motivation for Arthur, the soldier modestly replied, "No. Everyone in the army is already a hero. For their families, yes. We are defending Ukraine, and this is already a reward for us. Although, of course, it was nice to meet with the president, especially to hear him speak. Everything will be Ukraine. It touched me. I believe that it will be. Even if you look at our unit, yesterday's farmer and an IT specialist are fighting side by side. Some came from big business. Others joined the army just to enjoy what they grew in their garden. Some have a large family waiting for them at home. Others have postponed their dream of starting a family until after the victory, because we are all fighting for the sake of the future. It is very cool to feel the power of this unity, to know that you can trust your comrade in arms with everything, even your life, because he will always have your back. Although it is unlikely that my words are 100% clear to those who have not been here. Do you know what really motivates me? Arthur adds, it's the certainty that I'm in the right place at the right time. Let me explain with an example. In the forest near Sinkivka, we lost radio contact with our guide. We looked for him from a drone, but in vain. Someone would have already written a note. Missing in action, this guy did not want to be a guide, but someone who knew the way had to bring the replenishment to the position. So I tried to persuade him to do it again. I squeezed the guy's shoulders and told him in his face that he was the best. We couldn't do it without him. The conductor did an incredible job, made a few moves, and was already returning from the mission. However, the enemy was cunning. They discovered our routes and started shooting at us with VOGs. He was wounded in the arm and leg and was bleeding to death. After a while, he managed to get in touch. I could feel that he was already losing consciousness. I called the guys from the neighboring positions and asked them to send someone to look for the soldier. I started forming a rescue group in my reserve. Most of them refused because they believed that in the night forest full of enemies, the chances of finding someone were negligible and we would put even more people down. Those 2 hours of the search operation felt like a week to me. I felt incredibly responsible for my comrade's life. He still managed to reach for his weapon with his surviving hand and make a shot in the air. That was the sound beacon that tracked him down. We sometimes talk to that guy on the phone, and every time he says, almost crying, "If not for you, everything could have ended differently." Today, the 32nd Separate Mechanized Brigade, in which Artur Lachenko serves, is fighting in the Toretsk sector. That's all for today, friends. If you liked this video, please like it, subscribe, and write in the comments my shortcomings and what can be done better in a video of this nature. I'd really appreciate some healthy criticism to help me get better and make better videos for you. Hello! Today I would like to tell you the story of a military man who is called the Ukrainian Remarque. I also invite you to write in the comments what similar stories you know. The most interesting story will be included in the next video, and we will be able to share it together. Now, let's get back to the story of the Ukrainian Remarque. 26-year-old Alexander Budko from Rivne had big plans for 2022. He was going to become a graphic designer and was working his last shift as a barista in one of the establishments in Kiev's Podol district. But on the morning of February 24th, everything changed, and instead of going to work, Alexander started looking for a way to volunteer for the front. He didn't go to the military registration and enlistment office. There were queues, and it was not a given that he would be accepted due to his health condition. "I had problems with my legs," he explains, smiling. There is a bitter irony in these words. Exactly 6 months later, on August 24th, Alexander, already a platoon commander of the 49th Separate Carpathian Siege Rifle Battalion, call sign Terren, would lose both of his legs during the Kharkiv counteroffensive. The soldier writes about his military everyday life and his injuries in an unvarnished manner in his Instagram diary, which is read by more than 23,000 people. Some of them call him the Ukrainian Remarque, others call him Kurt Vonnegut, who could tell the most tragic stories with humor, and Alexander likes his countryman Ulas Samchuk. Now the military man has a new plan. He is writing a book, adapting to life on his new iron legs. The title of his future military autobiography is The Story of a Stubborn Man. Alexander says that this successfully describes his way to the front line. Before the war, he had never held a weapon, but he had a great desire to get into the thick of things. As the soldier explains, he did not want the sacrifices of those who gave their lives for Ukraine, starting with the wars of the Cossack era, to be in vain. It was a driving force that originated in me long ago, says Alexander. But everything turned out to be not so simple. At first, he joined one of the nationalist organizations with which he went shooting for a month and a half and studied tactical medicine. He was preparing to become an assault pilot, but got tired of waiting for a chance to prove himself. While the battle for Kiev was going on, his service was limited to guarding a building with important data for the state, the soldier says. In April, the guys were told that they had a combat mission. Quote, there were explosions, tanks, special forces, and we were like, this is great. But then they said that we were an evacuation group and that our attempts to get into the assault group were useless. I was upset, and then this task was canceled as well. Soon, the volunteers decided to leave and find themselves in other units. Alexander ended up in the Carpathian Sick, where a month later, he was appointed commander of a fire support platoon of the 2nd Company. But there were obstacles even here. When the battalion was sent to the Izium area in May, the car where Alexander was supposed to sit broke down. We had to either change the car or stay in Kiev for an unknown period of time. It was my 5th or 6th attempt to get to the front, and I said to myself, no, this is a bit of a surreal story. I have to go, the soldier recalls. Eventually, part of the group was loaded into a cargo van. There was room for everyone except Alexander and 2 other guys. He was beginning to give up when the commander came and said that he was going to the front in his car and that he could join him. Alexander was happy. He admits it was like a holiday for him. He liked being in the army. In his volunteer battalion, he says, there were no lineups at 7 in the morning and 7 in the evening, no strict reporting, and commanders were often addressed on a first-name basis. In addition, a week after arriving in the Kharkiv region on May 19th, they slowly began to advance. Alexander remembers the day of his injury, August 24, in detail. He recalls waking up at 3 in the morning. The whole village was covered in blue and yellow ribbons and flags. It was impressive. Late in the evening, when the soldiers were returning from their positions, none of this was there yet. The locals had worked hard to make a holiday for themselves and the military. The soldiers took their rations and came to the neighboring village to their mortar positions. Our men had already entered several nearby positions, took them back, and took several prisoners. A tank started firing at the landing, and we could not reach it with the mortar. It was more than 7 kilometers away, and the command ordered us to wait for new coordinates and targets, says Alexander. The day was hot, and the guys decided to take a break for lunch. They were always tired. They went to bed at 10 or 11 in the evening and got up at 3 or 4, the soldier says. So, after having lunch, they decided to take a nap. The soldiers lay down under a sprawling walnut tree, behind which they could not see their positions, and Alexander decided that it was safer to stay in the trench. After getting comfortable, he took off his armor. He says that the village had never been hit before, and it even surprised the military, but Alexander never thought he would be killed or injured. Quote, and I started to fall asleep when at one point, no one heard a whistle or an exit. I felt a terrible pain in my legs, and the ground shifted on me. I started screaming. My comrades were alive. They dug me up, quickly put a tourniquet on me, and called for evacuation. The soldier says he immediately realized that such severe pain did not bode well. Even before arriving at the front, he had come up with the idea of writing his blood type not only on his chevron, but also on his pants and boots. And when he was being carried on a stretcher, he comforted himself with the thought that even though he was not wearing a chevron vest, the inscriptions on his boots should have survived. In his diary, he recalls looking up to make sure and seeing that there was little left of his boots. His feet were still there, Alexander says, but they had nothing to hold on to. The soldier says that he is most offended that all this happened during the Kharkiv counteroffensive, and he wanted to reach at least Izium. In the neighboring village of Barvinkove, Alexander underwent his first amputation. Then he was taken to a hospital in Kharkiv, then to Poltava. Because I was in Kharkiv for several days without surgery, tissue began to die off, and the doctor said that my left leg should also be elevated, he says. Alexander speaks of inadequate medical care. I was there in Poltava, and I started to actually rot, and the doctors did not want to let me go to Kiev or home to Rivne to the hospital, no matter how much I asked. Eventually, through my friend's volunteer connections, I was admitted to the central hospital in Kiev, and there I underwent 2 more amputations, the soldier says. He began to fear that at this rate he might lose his knee, but it was not to be. His parents didn't know about the amputations. The soldier wanted to tell them after all the surgeries, so as not to upset them once again. He almost missed it. They learned about the news from social media, where Alexander's friend announced a fundraiser for medical expenses. Quote, "Of course, there were tears in my eyes, but I set them in a different mood. I immediately put everything in its place, that I can take care of myself, that I don't need to bring diapers, wipe my mouth." Alexander began to realize that he would have to live in a new way only when he got into a wheelchair and started moving around the streets. In Kiev, it was not so difficult, but in Rivne and Lviv, where there are a lot of cobblestones, it is almost impossible to use a wheelchair, the soldier says. He also noticed that people often look down when they see amputations. Lviv-based photographer Marta Serko also noticed this. She recalled how in museums, people stand in long lines to look at beautiful ancient Roman statues, although many of them also lack arms, legs, or noses. This contrast surprised her, and she invited Alexander to a photo shoot to show people living monuments, the closest witnesses of the war, which she believed should be admired in the same way. He agreed to inspire his fellow soldiers not to be shy either. Quote, "And as I heard, some guys agreed to a photo shoot after my photos, and people are slowly overestimating the situation that is and will be in our country prostheses and getting to know America." 3 months after his injury, Alexander was fitted with prostheses. In Ukraine, good prostheses are made for the military free of charge. If it is a case of losing an arm or a hip, the best technologies are abroad, he says. He was fitted with perfect prostheses, but Alexander also applied to the Revived Soldiers Ukraine Foundation, which has been helping to provide prosthetics to Ukrainian soldiers since 2014, and a few months later, he got to the United States. There, he was fitted with special sports prostheses, some for running and others for CrossFit, because the soldier was actively involved in sports before the war, and now he wants to start running professionally. Prostheses can be changed depending on the task. That's why now I have 6 legs. I look like a spider, Alexander laughs. Learning to run on prostheses is difficult, but he is motivated. In July, Dusseldorf will host the Invictus Games, where military, rescue, and law enforcement personnel who were injured in the war compete. In Miami, Alexander realized another dream of his. He saw the ocean and made sure he could swim without prostheses. It was the first time since his injury. I was laughing and enjoying myself like a child. I was no longer afraid of sharks. They usually bite off my legs, he wrote in his diary. The soldier says Americans are not surprised by steel limbs. His prosthetic center was full of people, adults, teenagers, and very young children. Quote, "Sometimes you walk down the street and children may pay attention and ask their parents something, but in general, society does not react so noticeably, perhaps because it was common there before and now it is considered normal. And we still have some remnants of the Soviet Union where there were no disabled people because they were not seen." Quote, "I am grateful to my legs for walking so much. Hundreds of people in Ukraine have already gotten back on their feet of steel. At the Superhumans Prosthetic Center, which will open in a few weeks in the Lviv region, they estimate that about 5,000 Ukrainians will need prostheses based on statistics from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, Alexander is living a full life with his new legs. He says he still has phantom pains. Quote, "Yesterday, my fingers felt like there was a current running through them, but he is moving forward and has a lot of plans. The soldier says he feels like an idea generator, and he is no longer interested in graphic design. Now he is studying online to become an art manager and is taking classes at a school of journalism. He was invited there after noticing a diary that Alexander started on Instagram a few days before he arrived at the front line. There, he talks about his comrades, frontline stories, and his injuries. Quote, "I wrote primarily for myself, but I wanted others to read about those who are fighting for us, and that they are not really cyborgs, but ordinary people like you and me." Now, his teachers at the School of Journalism, such famous writers as Yuri Andrukovich, Oksana Zabushko, Lyubko Deresh, and others, teach him to write better, to think over the plot and characters. The soldier hopes that this will have a favorable effect on his book. He also plans to work for superhumans to help with the rehabilitation of his fellow soldiers. But for now, Alexander notes, he is still a Carpathian Sich fighter, and he has a military medical commission ahead of him that may dismiss him or recognize him as partially fit for service at the headquarters or other authorities. The soldier admits that he does not know what he wants more. Quote, "I plan to go somewhere to the front, talk to the military, raise morale, and maybe even work a little, and then I will make the final decision, whether to associate myself with the military or to help wounded soldiers, civilians, and develop inclusion in Ukraine." He looks back on his past life without nostalgia, rather with gratitude, says 26-year-old Alexander Budko. "I'm grateful to my legs for walking so much, for going so many places, for seeing so much. I think it gave me the impetus, understanding, and skills that I can use now, standing on prostheses. Don't miss the chances that are under your feet or even in your legs," the soldier advises thousands of his readers. That's the story, dear friends. Let us know in the comments if you liked it and what you think about such stories. Also, don't forget that if you have a similar story, you can write about it in the comments, and then I will be able to make and distribute a video about your story so that as many people as possible can learn about the heroism and sacrifices of the military, defending freedom and standing up for their country. Tell my mom I'll be home soon. On the eve of March 8th, Serhiy unexpectedly received an audio message from someone else's Instagram page. He recognized the voice of his godfather, Vlad Ivanov, who, along with his brother Stas, was taken prisoner by Russia near the Kherson Bridge on February of the 24th. The mother also recognized her son's voice, and in the background, she could hear the sound of wheels, as if he were on his way home. "I thought I'd get there by train, and I waited outside until 3 in the morning. I don't know what I was thinking at the time," says Olena Ivanova, and starts to cry. Vlad and Stas never arrived that night. On the night of September 23 to 24, Olena did not sleep again. Her blood pressure spiked, and she was waiting for the lists. 215 people were returning home from captivity. Among them were 10 foreign fighters, many Azovites, and famous commanders of the Azovstal defense. The country was stirred by this long-awaited good news. The SBU reports that 20 exchanges have already taken place, and 802 Ukrainians are free. Several thousand more, including 616 women, including pregnant women, continue to be held by the Russians, says Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk. "We are talking about 2,500 prisoners. People remain in captivity, and the worst thing is that civilians remain there," she told BBC News Ukraine. The Ukrainian government has previously claimed that more than 2,000 Ukrainian soldiers have left Azovstal. At the same time, the Russian side speaks of 6,000 to 8,000 prisoners from the Ukrainian side. The Chechen said, "We'll hold you and let you go." The Ivanov brothers from Verkhivtsev in the Dnipro region are almost the same age. Vlad is 26, and Stas turned 25 in captivity. They went to the same class, then to the same group at the technical school. Almost at the same time, they signed a contract and joined the same military unit. Both were in the ATO. At the time of the Russian invasion, Vlad Ivanov was a squad leader of the 59th Brigade, and Stas was a grenade launcher in an infantry company. On the morning of February of the 24th, Vlad called a friend to wish him a happy birthday. The friend did not hear him, and when he called back, the Chechen had already answered the phone, and Vlad himself confirmed that he was in captivity, his mother says. The Chechen said, "Don't worry, we'll hold you and let you go." The woman recounts the conversation. Stas told his wife about his capture and told her to take care of their 7-year-old son, Arthur. Just like Vlad, Stas received a new message from someone else's number before March 8th. "Mom, I'm fine. I'm wounded in a hospital in Sevastopol, but I won't be disabled." Then she found a video on the internet where Stas, a prisoner, gives an interview with his head bandaged. In May, their fellow countrymen, who had been exchanged from Zmini Island, told Olena that he had seen the boys. According to him, they were in a pre-trial detention center in Kursk, in the Belgorod region, and in Taganrog. Another guy called, my mother recalls, saying that Vlad was in Nova Kakhovka and that he had been shot in the legs. The family doesn't know where their brother is now. Stas's son, who looks very much like his father, started first grade in the fall. He is told that his father is at war. Olena recalls that once when a fighter jet was flying too low, the boy took his 8-year-old friend's hand and said, "Don't be afraid. My dad is fighting for Ukraine and will save us all." There was hell in Mariupol. Now there is a second hell. In January, my son was on vacation. He said that he was going to train in Western Ukraine, says Irina Solenchuk. Her son Vladislav is serving in the 43rd Brigade, the 209th Separate Anti-Tank Division. Irina did not know that her son was in Mariupol until the last moment. On February 24, he called me at 5 in the morning and said, "Mom, pack your things and go to the basement. The war has started," she recalls. Vladislav wrote to his mother every day. And on April 12th, when he broke through the encirclement from the Ilyich Iron and Steelworks in Mariupol, he was captured along with 9 of his comrades. Irina learned about it from her son's commander. The woman found the mothers of 9 other soldiers who were taken prisoner with her son. First, the prisoners were sent to Olenivka, and then transferred to a prison in Taganrog. In early June, Irina received a letter from Vladislav. It's in Russian, although we only speak Ukrainian in the family. He writes in his handwriting that he is not wounded, the woman says. There was hell in Mariupol. Now there is a second hell. We don't know how they are there. I don't know how to expect it, says Irina. He doesn't know he's a dad yet. This baby is my grandson Renat. He was born less than a month ago. His father doesn't know about his birth, although he was dreaming and waiting for it. Ina Kolbasova from Mariupol posted a photo of her grandson wearing socks with the words, "I love my dad," on the social network. Volodymyr Kolbasov, a dog handler with the National Guard, like most of the Azovstal defenders, was captured on May the 18th while his family and pregnant wife were hiding in the basements of the city under fire. On February 24, Volodymyr went to his unit to guard a dog kennel. Soon after, it was bombed and all the dogs burned to death, his mother says. He managed to give his German Shepherd to his family. The last time Volodymyr was seen was on March 15th, when he dropped by his house for a few minutes. They heard from him again in April. The family found out that their son was wounded. Shrapnel was removed from his face and arm, but not from his leg. The family didn't know that their son was at Azovstal. They hardly heard any news without the connection. We were in shock because this plant was constantly being bombed. Everything in the house shook when they, Russians, Eddie May, dropped bombs on it. Those were the most terrifying days and nights, Ina says. The woman and her daughter-in-law left Mariupol in June. From July 28 to 29, they had another terrible night. A terrorist attack took place in Olenivka, where, as they were told, their son was being held. They lived in obscurity until September 6th, when a letter from Volodymyr suddenly arrived. He asked about his wife, knowing that she was due to give birth. They wrote him a reply, even printed a photo of the baby, Ed. We hope he will get it. Mom, we will win. The mother of National Guard soldier Maxim Shturmak from the village of Ustia in Lviv Oblast also did not know that her son was at Azovstal. The guy is only 21. Last August, he signed a contract before the end of his military service. After May 6th, he stopped getting in touch. Nothing was known. No one told us what was happening for almost a month, recalls his aunt Galina Vostrikova. They thought that maybe the phones were dead. After the evacuation of the soldiers, the family turned to the police to find the missing soldier. They were told that the military unit 3057, where Maxim was stationed, no longer existed, and hope died completely, Helena says. Later, it turned out that Maxim was among the survivors, and he was taken to Olenivka. In July, he told his friend that he was waiting for a trial in Donetsk, Helena says. As his family understood, he was taken from Olenivka a few days before the terrorist attack and then returned again. His friend Christina remembers Maxim as a sociable guy and a leader. He told her that after the victory, he wanted to write a book. To his classmate Ihor, he wrote about his shrapnel wound, after which he thought he was done. His family was worried when the media started talking about a Russian attack in December. Maxim said the military was ready to defend. "Mom, we will win," Katerina's mother recalls her son saying. Maxim Sturmak was released from captivity on February 16th, 2023. "I give up when my child is not on the list." 22-year-old Mariana Chechelyuk from Mariupol was named in honor of the Mother of God. Mariana is small and thin, but a fighter in life, says her mother, Natalia Chechelyuk. How much health is lost when you wait for those exchange lists and your child is not on them? You give up, but you gather your strength and start all over again. It's like a vicious circle, says the mother. The family lived in Mariupol near Azovstal. During the first days of the invasion, Mariana and her 15-year-old sister Alina were trapped in the plant's dungeon. Mariana is a police lieutenant and helped both military and civilians in the bomb shelter. Mariana and Alina were leaving Azovstal through the humanitarian corridor for civilians on May 1st. However, Mariana was detained at the filtration in Novoazovsk. Only a month later, Natalia learned from a call from a stranger that Mariana was in Donetsk, alive. She was kept in a separate cell for 2 months. "My child hasn't been out for 62 days, hasn't seen the sun." On June of the 27th, Mariana was transported to Olenivka. This was told by a released volunteer from Mariupol. The family appealed to all authorities responsible for the release of prisoners. They know about Mariana Chechelyuk, but so far, they cannot return her. "I have always asked for all children, for all daughters and sons. I really want everyone to come back and mothers to hug their children," Natalia says. And she wishes no mother to go through what she went through. Do not forget about Chongar. On the night of February of the 24th, a conscript with the call sign Malyi, his name and surname are known to the BBC, but his family does not want to publish them. Ed, from Kherson region, was on duty in the village of Chongar, which borders on Crimea. He called and said that everything was fine, that he loved everyone. "We didn't hear his voice again," says a cousin about her 21-year-old brother. In the morning, the family found out that part of it was destroyed, and a lot of bodies were burned, she says. But then an acquaintance recognized the guy in a Russian story about prisoners of war. He has been in captivity for 7 months and 2 days. He is very young. He has his whole life ahead of him. "There are a lot of guys left in Chongar," says the sister, worried that the prisoners from Chongar are hardly mentioned in the media. She wrote to Minister Irina Vereshchuk, called the Red Cross, and everyone kept saying that her brother was alive. Meili wrote a letter to his family. "It says nothing about whether he is eating or healthy," his sister says, "but only that he has a hard winter ahead, but he believes he will return home." His mother communicates with the mothers of the boys from Chongar, and they saw her son. 2 of them were exchanged. "Write that he is very kind to us. Everyone knows this. He has many friends. He used to gather 2 or 3 streets for his birthday. And when he earned his first money, he carried watermelons in the field, bought sweets for his mother and medicine for his grandmother. We are all waiting for him." The Coordination Center says that after the large-scale exchange on September of the 21st, the process will go faster. Within a week, 6 more people were returned. Ukraine promises to return everyone. Every day, dozens of Ukrainians are seriously injured, and many military and civilians lose their limbs due to Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine. To live a full life, they will need prostheses. In Ukraine, prosthetics are free of charge. But this process has its challenges and problems. Victims of hostilities are not always informed or do not believe in the capabilities of Ukrainian medicine, so they often look for prosthetics abroad. Of course, to get a high-quality prosthesis in Ukraine, you need to go through certain bureaucratic procedures. Experts also talk about problems with the workload of domestic doctors and the lack of rehabilitation centers. In addition, the negative experience of previous years tells the wounded that they may not receive a quality prosthesis in Ukraine. However, the authorities and doctors assure us that modern prostheses are fitted in Ukraine and are done free of charge and with high quality. How to get a prosthesis at public expense, and is it worth going abroad? We explain the main nuances and tell the stories of our heroes. Number of victims. The number of victims in need of prosthetics runs into the hundreds, and although the authorities do not give official figures, the number of victims is growing every day. In June, Health Minister Viktor Lyashko said that more than 500 Ukrainians need prosthetics and rehabilitation due to limb loss. According to rough estimates by the Prosthetic Support Project in Ukraine, a nonprofit training initiative, the number of amputations has tripled on average compared to previous years. The Fund for Social Protection of Persons with Disabilities, which is responsible for prosthetics from the state, told BBC News Ukraine that 212 servicemen applied for prosthetics between February of the 24th and September 11th. 84 of them have already been fitted with prosthetic limbs and undergone rehabilitation. Another 128 soldiers are waiting for their prostheses to be manufactured. Charitable foundations and organizations that help affected Ukrainians also report a large number of people who have turned to them for help with prosthetics. According to their information, it is from 150 to 1,500 people. I want to go back to the front. Vlad and Maxim are both soldiers. They went to defend the country immediately after Russia's full-scale invasion, were wounded, and both lost one leg. Russia has aviation and art. That's why there are so many of our guys with severed limbs, explains Vlad, who fought in the Izium sector. Instead of his right leg, he now has a modern prosthesis. At first, it was hard to stand on it. 4 months without movement took their toll. But after a week and a half of work by the prosthetist and sessions with a rehabilitation therapist, the man was able to walk without crutches. Now, when I walk with the prosthesis, I can feel my foot. I feel as if it were my leg. I can even step on the gas in the car. Vlad is happy. Maxim also had to get used to the prosthesis for some time. He says walking is comfortable, though still unusual. After prosthetics and rehabilitation, the soldier returned to service in the armed forces. Vlad also plans to return to the front. I will ask to go back because this war needs to end. We were there. We know everything, the soldier says. Vlad is very glad that he was lucky enough to receive prosthetics abroad. He recalls his fellow soldiers who received prostheses in Ukraine in previous years. They complained of discomfort and lack of functionality. Prosthetics abroad. Vlad and Maxim were the first of 5 Ukrainian soldiers to receive prosthetics in the United States. All expenses were covered by the Prosthetics for Ukrainians project. Along with them, 2 children and a civilian man from Bucha received prostheses. Anyone can apply for prosthetics. To do this, you need to have a healed stump, part of the limb remaining after amputation, and a ready-made passport. We also have a division into upper and lower limbs so that we don't get easy cases. We provide prosthetics to children without waiting in line. And among the military, there is an additional division. If it is a specialist who wants to return to the front, we will take them first, says the project's co-founder Yuri Aroshidze. Ukrainian-born prosthetist Yakiv Hradinar is surprised by the progress and speed with which Ukrainians are learning to use prosthetics. Despite the fact that patients are taught to cope with the prosthesis on their own, they will need the support of specialists in Ukraine. Therefore, the project founders are thinking about opening their center here. According to our unofficial and approximate statistics, there are 1,500 people in Ukraine who need prosthetics. This is a collection of information from the National Guard, hospitals, etc., says Prosthetics for Ukrainians. Challenges for the system. Prosthetics and rehabilitation in Ukraine have developed significantly over the past 8 years, says Olena Tolkacheva, head of Azov's patronage service. There is no problem in Ukraine now that you have to go abroad to get a high-quality prosthesis. Doctors already have practice and contracts with different manufacturers to fit prostheses that are no different in quality from American or European ones, says Tolkacheva. The challenge for medicine today is the large number of wounded who appeared after February of the 24th. Because of this, she said, there is a catastrophic shortage of rehabilitation centers and professional rehabilitation specialists in Ukraine. All this slows down the system. The practice of sending soldiers abroad will relieve Ukrainian prosthetists, Tolkacheva says, adding that several soldiers in the regiment have gone to the United States for a year for prosthetics. Patients with complex cases, such as amputation above the hip or amputation of a part of the foot, are also sent abroad. Don't leave to get back in the line of duty. At the same time, the patronage service states that Azov fighters are not eager to go for prosthetics in order to return to service as soon as possible. There are guys who were wounded after February of the 24th, got prosthetics and returned to their units. There are up to a dozen of them in Azov alone, says Tolkacheva. This is the story of Vladislav, who goes by the call sign Carter. At the age of 17, he volunteered for the Donbas Battalion and later joined the Azov Regiment. In early March, he was injured by an air bomb. The last thing I remember is an explosion 2 meters away from me. In March, Carter was evacuated from the besieged Mariupol. He was transported for 15 hours to Zaporizhia, underwent surgery in Dnipro, and had a prosthetic limb in Lviv. Carter has already learned to walk on a prosthesis, and, like most wounded soldiers, he wants to return to service. Get prosthetics in Ukraine. Prosthetics at Home in Ukraine is advocated by a special project to support prosthetics. There is no need to get prosthetics abroad. There is a need to introduce new prosthetics in Ukraine, says Olena Tsimbaliuk, a project representative. In addition, adds the project's founder Antonina Kumka, prosthetics should be made where the person lives, because the prosthesis needs to be maintained. The Prosthetics Support Project in Ukraine trains prosthetists and rehabilitation specialists, and, together with the Ministry of Social Policy, informs victims about their rights and opportunities. The problem with Ukraine's prosthetics industry is that it is still seen as something backward, a basement with wooden legs. But everyone remembers the state of Ukrainian dentistry before, and everyone knows what level it is now, says Antonina Kumka. Olena Tsimbaliuk explains that the quality of prosthetics depends not on the country of prosthetics, but on the competence of the prosthetist. There are good and bad specialists both abroad and in Ukraine, and all the components, hands, feet, and knees, are mostly bought abroad: Scotland, Germany, USA, Japan. The price of the prosthesis experts say the amount of money the state currently spends on prosthetics is enough to buy a modern and functional prosthesis. This year, the government has budgeted about 2 billion hryvnias for technical rehabilitation equipment for people with disabilities. In the draft budget for next year, this amount was increased, providing 2.8 billion UAH for rehabilitation aids and another 356 million UAH for prosthetics with increased functionality. All Ukrainians who have lost a limb can get a high-quality prosthesis for money from the budget, the authorities insist. The Fund for Social Protection of Persons with Disabilities reported that prosthetics for military personnel depends on their functional capabilities and the type of prosthesis. It can range from 20,000 hryvnias, a lower leg prosthesis, of the first mobility level, to 220,000 hryvnias, a modular hip prosthesis with a 4-link knee assembly and a silicone composition insert of the 4th mobility level, i.e. of the highest quality, the statement reads. In addition, the maximum price may be tripled for combatants. The highest quality dentures are available for free. The funds allocated by the state are quite enough to cover primary prosthetics, either mechanical or cosmetic. If civilians want to get a highly functional prosthesis, they have to pay the difference at their own expense. For the military, the second high-tech stage of prosthetics is free of charge. These are myoelectric prosthetic arms, myoelectric knees, and functional feet. Such prostheses are driven by electrodes that read the current produced by the stump muscles during contraction. The cost of one functional foot starts at $3,000, and the price of a myoelectric hand starts at $5,000 to $7,000. A person can get the highest quality prostheses available in the world for free in Ukraine. There is no need to go abroad, says the Prosthetics Support Project. If prosthetics for the military in Ukraine are free and modern, why are there cases of fundraising for prosthetics? The Prosthetics Support Project sees several options for such actions. People are not aware of their rights and opportunities, or they want to do good to someone else because they think there are better opportunities abroad, says Olena Tsimbaliuk. Sometimes you really have to raise money for a state-of-the-art, expensive prosthesis. This is what Olena Tolkacheva from Azov's patronage service has experienced. When we need to pay extra, we have money that we raise and report on it, she says. What to do if you have lost a limb? Preparations for prosthetics begin almost immediately after leaving the operating room. The stump is prepared and rehabilitation is carried out. For prosthetics at public expense, you need to collect a package of documents. These include a decision of the Military Medical Commission and a document explaining the origin of the injury. This can be an extract from the commander's order, a certificate of the circumstances of the injury, or a copy of another document with information about participation in activities to protect Ukraine. The victim chooses a prosthetic company. There are about 50 of them in Ukraine. Together with the prosthetist, he or she determines the equipment of the product. A memo developed by the Prosthetic Support Project in Ukraine states that a prosthesis should be comfortable, and that success in mastering it lies in daily exercises. Indestructible and Superhumans Ukraine has also announced the creation of large rehabilitation centers that will deal with prosthetics, among other things. Both centers are located in the Lviv region. The Superhumans Initiative plans to set up a rehabilitation clinic for war victims with 100 beds and to organize the production of prostheses. They promise that all services will be free of charge. The region also launched a project to build a national rehabilitation center called Unbreakable. The center's first patient was 33-year-old paratrooper Mikhailo Yurchuk. In March of 2022, he lost his arm and leg in a battle near Izium. The center has also installed the world's lightest prosthesis by Unlimited Tomorrow. It is a bionic arm printed on 3D printers, and it is for 32-year-old Yuri from Lviv. The first to receive this prosthesis was 9-year-old Sasha Filipchuk from Gostomel. She and her mother are currently undergoing rehabilitation in the United States. Both projects want to raise the level of prosthetics in Ukraine to the point where Ukrainians don't have to go abroad to get a prosthesis. Ukrainian robo-hand. In addition to the technologies that Ukrainian prosthetists are learning to work with, Ukrainians themselves are developing high-tech equipment. For example, the Ukrainian startup Esper Bionics has developed a bionic arm with electrical sensors that allow muscle signals to move the prosthesis so effectively. For us, Ukraine is not about business or market expansion. It's about providing our people with a good product and supporting them while they use our device, says Anna Belyantseva, the company's chief operating officer. Esper Bionics plans to manufacture and install upper limb prostheses together with clinics, as well as train Ukrainian specialists. The company notes a great deal of interest and a large number of initiatives in the prosthetics industry in Ukraine today. I think all of this will help upgrade prosthetic technology in Ukraine. These should be long-term projects with the support of the state and society, says Annabelle Yantseva. According to the Esper Bionics representative, Ukraine has a number of problems in the field of prosthetics. In particular, there's a lack of modern, fast technologies for the manufacture of a stump receiver. There's also a lack of qualified rehabilitation doctors with such a large number of victims. But the biggest pain of the city is visible in the cemetery in the village nearby. People from the town and the community are buried there. Initially, the military were given a place at the entrance, and their graves, like in all villages and towns across the country, are impossible to miss because of the blue and yellow flags. That small piece of land quickly ran out of space. Now the soldiers are buried at the other end of the cemetery. So far, there are only 17 graves there, says Oksana Tarasyuk. But the cleared wasteland for future graves is frightening. They say that time heals. It is not true, tell everyone. Time only dulls, Oksana Tarasyuk says at the end of the conversation. After his death, his parents were brought their son's belongings, including a phone that had been cleared of all memories. Oksana decided to keep it for herself. She admits that she sometimes calls her son, even though she knows that the phone he should have picked up is now in her hand. That night, the two of them went on a mission. His partner was a 19-year-old contract soldier. From the words of his comrades, Oksana knows that Serhiy was called a guardian angel for a less experienced soldier. He traveled with him for some time and provided insurance. The mother does not know exactly what happened. Her son's comrades in arms said that Serhiy and his partner were returning to the unit 3 kilometers away when they were covered by mortar fire. Serhiy covered the contract soldier with himself. The other guy was only wounded, but our son's head was blown off, his mother recounts from the words of his comrades. She was told that her son died at night, but the mother says that at 7:40 in the morning, he called her, although she could not understand a word, so he was still alive. After that conversation, I immediately said that my son was gone, but on Monday, the military enlistment office said it was not true. Wait 10 days, says Oksana. It was the 1st of October, and on October 6th, she was confirmed that yours was the 200th. Life after. On October 8th, Serhiy was buried. The coffin was closed, it was even wrapped in plastic, and we were not allowed to open it, she says. My father and I were not allowed to see it, but my brother, sister, and godfather went to look at the photo and recognized him. Why they didn't let me see it, I don't know. Maybe they know better. Now she realizes that she is still lucky. Some of the guys who were in those places with Serhiy were brought back a month later, and some a year later. After her son's death, she quit her job as a cleaner in a nearby cultural center and moved with her sick husband to a dacha. Oksana says that the compensation for her son's death is being paid regularly. Millions of hryvnias were divided among the family members and will be paid for 4 years. Part of the payments went to the playground and the surveillance cameras around it. Although Oksana says she decided to build the playground even before the compensation. It wasn't easy. They had to get permission from the city council and the approval of their neighbors. Then, they worked together to select swings and exercise equipment, helped carry sand and plant trees. Not everyone liked it, Oksana says. Some people were annoyed by the construction noise in the yard and the noise of the children. But now, it seems, everyone likes the changes. From time to time, Oksana comes to this yard from her dacha by bike. Now her daughter and her family live in the 9-story building. Whenever you're not here, there are lots of children. They are happy here, she says. Memory. On March 1st, Serhiy would have been 37 years old. Our family is proud of our son. He was not afraid to go to the front and died like a hero, says his mother. On his birthday, his family wanted to make him a present and created a petition to have Serhiy awarded the title of Hero of Ukraine. When we first started writing the petition, the commander said that Serhiy had already been nominated for the order twice, in Kiev, but everything was lost somewhere, so we decided to write it ourselves, because not everyone can protect another guy, says Oksana. 25,000 signatures were collected quickly. As soon as this happened, the parents were informed that their son had been awarded the Order of Bogdan Khmelnytsky, 2nd class. It must have been a coincidence, says Oksana. My parents went to Lviv to get the order. This is Serhiy's 2nd award. Another one was given by the mayor's office in Varash. There has been no response to the petition yet. The next step is to install a memorial plaque on the facade of the 9-story building. Today, such plaques can be seen on some schools in the city. Lyceum number 3, where Serhii studied, is right across the street from his playground. I thought that if they put a sign there, I wouldn't do it on my house. But the school told me that a lot of their boys died, and they would come up with something after the war, says Oksana. So far, the school has painted a mural of a boy in a military uniform reading a book, and inside, they have set up a corner with photos of all the local soldiers who died for Ukraine. There is another photo wall in the students' room, as well as a list. It contains 97 fallen soldiers from Varash. 12 of them are graduates of the school, although the list may not have been updated yet. The oldest graduate who died was 36 years old. The youngest was 25. I studied at this school. Some of these guys are younger than me, and I remember them running around during breaks. My classmate is among them. A portrait of him, Serhii, and dozens of other boys can be seen in the city center opposite the city hall. Everything there is covered in flowers. Serhii Tarasyuk, a radio telephone gunner with the engineering company of the 24th Separate Mechanized Brigade, named after King Danilo, died on October 1st, 2022, in the Kherson region. He was 35 years old, the youngest son of his parents. Some people have grandchildren, but we have nothing after our son. We decided to make a playground to sit on a bench, look at other children, and remember our son. Oksana Tarasyuk, the military's mother, tells BBC Ukraine. The woman says she is pleased to see how many children now come here to use the swings and exercise bikes, and teenagers love the tennis table. It's as if life goes on. There was nothing like this here before. I passed by this yard for many years, hurrying to school, and I can only remember a single swing and horizontal bars. As it turned out later, my father had once installed them for Serhii and his older brother. Apparently, many children who come to play there today do not know to whom they owe these changes. There is no plaque with Serhii's name on it anywhere on the playground. But soon it will appear on the facade of the building. The family is still hurting over the death of their son, but they are proud of him. Don't go away, son. When the Great War broke out, the Tarasyuks, their children and grandchildren, the eldest son had just had a son, decided to go to the countryside to their dacha. The family has a large unfinished house there, and they live there from time to time. Varash is a quiet town, not far from the Belarusian border, home to 50,000 people. But there is the Rivne nuclear power plant there, and it seemed quite logical that after the Russians seized the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, this town could be the next target. Many people were leaving, Oksana Tarasyuk recalls. We stayed at the dacha for 2 or 3 weeks and decided that we would not leave. My younger son, Serhii, worked as a driver and started delivering humanitarian aid to the front. Even then, he started talking about joining the armed forces, but his mother was against it. I said, "Don't go, son, unless you get a call up, and don't go yourself." The call came at the end of April. Everything happened quickly, Oksana recalls. In the afternoon, Serhii packed his things, picked up the car, and left. The whole family saw him off in front of the military commissariat. For some reason, everyone decided to come, she recalls. She has a photo of that moment. It was the last time Oksana saw her son. A guardian angel, Serhii, like many soldiers, did not talk much about what he saw at the front. He said everything was calm. He didn't complain, even though we sent him parcels every other day. Clothes, food. They were bombed once and everything was gone. The next time, Oksana recalls, his family has many photos of his life during the war. Here is the car Serhii worked on. It can mine and clear mines. Here are the trenches where they lived, where they can see their weapons and a phone with a video on. Here he is with his comrades making barbecue. Here he is in Mykolaiv on rotation. There are such good people there, he told his mother. In many of the photos, Serhii is smiling, next to his fellow soldiers, or his friend Dmytro Tsyurko from Lviv. Dmytro also died. In March of 2024, his heart gave out. One can only guess how much remained behind the scenes. During his 5 months at the front, Serhii was in Bakhmut, Avdiivka, and then the Kherson offensive. Serhii didn't go on vacation, saying that people had children, but I had no one. I'll come back later. I have one more task. He said he would definitely come to dig potatoes. Serhii died in the Kherson region, in the recently liberated Bilohirka in Berislav district. He died when he covered another guy, a mechanic driver, his comrades told his mother.